4 shots will kill a man.
Yeah, I think we can take 5.
You heads up, you big man.
Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna smash him right in the face. Kill all 13 guys in 3 seconds.
I'm gonna drop kick him, and him.
No, that's my guy.
It's my gun.
Kill all 13 guys in 3 seconds.
I'm gonna drop kick him,
No, that's my guy.
It's my gun.
Kill all 13 guys in 3 seconds.
I'm gonna drop kick him,
That's my guy.
It's my gun.
Kill all 13 guys in 3 seconds.
I'm gonna drop kick him.
Kill all 13 guys in 3 seconds.
Yo, it's stream time. Alright, let's get this going. Hold up. Set up. How's everyone doing? If there's any issue, just let me know if you can't hear me or whatever. But I think looks like everything's fine from when I check the microphone. But I'm just getting my drink. Sitting down. Trying to get comfortable. So we can do this. Now, I think Facebook has been weird when it comes to streaming, so we'll just leave that alone for now. But I'll have to check actually. Let me check right now. Restream.io. Let me log in. Let's see. Of course, I have to verify a frickin' bridge. Sending. Oh, Facebook is online. Oh, look at that. Never thought that would happen. Alright, cool. We can do it one of two ways. We can either do some feedback stuff now. I can make a folder, I guess. And I can put that link in there, or you can email it to me. You can do either or. But until that time, we'll let the people vote, of course. But until that time, I'm gonna keep painting and get the colors right on this. So I think people that were here before, they're gonna see what was going on. We had everything kind of designed out. If you watch the previous video, you'll see how I got here. The previous Twitch or stream that I did. So now I think it's time to start kind of figuring out the colors and start figuring out some of the secondary details. So the secondary detail is stuff like that. It's going to help kind of sell it and give it a little bit more of a just visual interest. And that's more just for, I guess for me, it's like a personal thing. Like I always try to kind of layer things a little bit whenever I can. And I always try to kind of like change like little shifts in color. Little off values here and there will go a long way. So the next thing I actually would do is I would actually go in here, maybe get like a 1 lighter value, and then I would actually, it's probably too much, but a little bit, no, not that much, okay. And there we go. Is I would go in here and then I would get, I still don't like that value actually. There we go. maybe a value like this, is to then go and then maybe paint in some different colors in there, and this will help in the long run with getting, again, that more kind of layering process. So I like to do things in threes, as people probably already who know me already, like, you know that I like to kind of layer kind of detail in threes, because it just makes it a little bit easier to deal with, and overall it just kind of helps just like give me a little bit more to work with in terms of like visual interest. You can see that little bit of color as I'm kind of putting it in different places, and I can always change it. I can always like change it a little bit back too if I feel like it's too much. So we'll see how it goes, but I may not want the contrast to be that deep, but we do want to like change that color. And the beauty of that is because it's all layered, I can always change this color like really easily. So I'm gonna do that right now. So I'm just gonna go in here and just mess that up. So right here, all I have to really do is let me turn down the viewer music a little bit more. Cool. All I gotta do is then just change the color. I can do this any type of way I want. So I guess Control U is probably the easiest, and just colorize it, and then so I have that. All right, and that could easily work. But I may as well just go to my color swatch that I already had. I think that's probably a better way to kind of start. So already we're getting some interesting colors, and helps me see where I gotta erase too. So if that's gonna be like that color, right? That means like the offhand color, which I have right here. That means I'd want to make this color something a little bit more, maybe a little bit more of a purplish, but I don't know. Actually, no, I want to go more towards like the greenish. No, it's not enough. So let's see. I don't want the contrast to be too much. But already that's looking kind of cool. It's looking really interesting. So that means that if I want to put a warmer color on here, now I have that option, because now all I really have to do is to click on that and then go something maybe like in the opposite color, something like in the purple range. So that's kind of cool, like that value. Maybe a little bit darker, so it kind of maybe a little bit more downward like that, maybe more in the purplish range. Yeah, something like that I think is cool. So now I feel like it's working a lot better. But I will be quiet now so I can just begin to paint. But if you have questions or want to do some feedback or something like that, we could do that. I don't think anyone's in the chat currently right now, so I think we're good. Because I don't see anything and people typing anything. So no one's here, so it makes it easy for me to focus. I don't think anyone's trying. Okay, cool. We're good. Actually, no. I think I can use. Where's that brush? Here we go. I think this is Stefan's brush. Pretty sure it is. Which means if I use this one, I need to use it as an eraser too. So I can kind of complete the randomness of it. Yeah, I see. It creates that nice kind of random. Of the shape, but it doesn't always work. I feel like I feel like this is the better one actually. Oops. I just want to get like some really interesting patterns. So this is, I think this is the part where kind of randomness, where I can't control it, I think really helps out. We want that to feel like relatively random. Cool. And eventually we can start doing like texture and stuff, but I don't think we need to worry about that quite yet. We could do... Ooh, that looks nice. And we can start throwing some gradations as well. Now that that's figured out, let's get this back part figured out. So what color do you want this to be? That's the question. I'm cool with it being a blue, but then I already use up these colors for the rocks, and I feel like this color is gonna need to be like a bluish like sand color. Let's actually put that in there now. But we can also use a gradation for that so that it doesn't feel like as much. So this is going to be a hard part. I'm not really sure. I wouldn't mind like an orangey kind of color with this guy. Let's see if this works. I don't think that works, to be honest. Maybe a green? Green could work. Maybe this color. Or maybe this color. Yeah, I think that works actually. But I don't want it to be that intense actually, so we'll have to maybe create like a gradation or something. Or something of that nature. So that's kind of cool. So then back there, that's gonna need to be... What's going on with my Dropbox? Up to date, up to date. Oh, do we get a new Dropbox? That's weird. Oh, this is like super saturated. I probably want it to be a little bit cooler. Okay. Which then means the ball will have to be this bright color. And I probably want it glowing too. So that would be nice. Alright, that's cool. Then I want all these to be dark. Like a dark color. So that way it stands out. So at least the color, the visual interest in the color, a little bit less. Which means this guy, why is this not working? Did I lock it? Yeah, I did lock it, that's why. I don't want it to lock, I just want to lock the transparency. Okay. So that's starting to look interesting, but I'd rather this be a little bit more of a greener color, to be honest. So how can I make that happen? Probably in this fashion of green. Yeah, that's much better. Which actually leads me to then this guy needs to be this value. Maybe just a little. Well, I'm right here. I'm gonna just go back down just a little bit and just change that value. See, now we're talking. And if that's the case, I wouldn't mind putting a little bit of that green in the background. Which does mean some things will have to change. I'm not really sure. Let's see. I'm trying to think of what value do I want this back. This will stand out, which is nice, so that makes it a little bit easier. And I probably need to. I'll have to separate. I'm gonna have to separate that. I didn't think about that at all. So this is gonna be tricky. So let me focus on that first, I guess. I need to focus on this area, and then focus on putting in this value here on a separate layer. So that way, I'll make it a little bit easier for me. Just checking my Facebook. This was me, of course. Alright, cool. So first things first, I don't like the shapes here, so I need to, there we go. I need to kind of, so I want to create a little bit of like that kind of thing going on here, but I need to have the same brush that I chose in order to do it. Cool, there you go. I don't want it to be too thick. I want it to kind of have a nice flow, but still keep some of that randomness to it. This is the hard part. Cool. Alright, in the meantime, what I want to do here is I have this color, but I don't want everything that color. So I will now do my due diligence and start to fill in some areas where I want some of these rocks to kind of be peppered in, so that way it kind of feels like it's trying to blend in with the environment. So that's all we're doing there. This will take like 2 seconds. And some of these I'll want to have a lot of, and some of them not so much. But the goal is to make it feel like as we get closer to that surface, maybe these rocks begin to kind of change color. This is the idea behind it, at least. No clue if it's gonna work, but that is where my head's at currently. And I feel like then eventually we can maybe put in some different colors, all that kind of stuff. A little more texture, I guess. And then next week we might go with a little more of a painterly thing, I think. It'd be nice. I also don't want everything to be the exact same value. So that's where that little hint of like off tone I think is like really cool, because then you can play off of that. So you have like those 3 tones you kind of just keep rotating through. So I don't want everything to be the same value, if I can help you. I'm gonna zoom in here. So by doing that right there, that little off tone is going to be pretty useful. I don't know why my dog is barking so much, for whatever reason. Toby! Okay. Oh, I guess he's done. Fix your pen. Probably telling me to fix my name. Which I understand. That part I'm still not happy with. Though I'm kind of happy with that. Maybe I just keep it like that, honestly. I don't really know. Maybe I do keep it like that. Because it seems like I have like more of a... Yeah, maybe I don't keep that blue in there. Huh? That's a hard one to kind of work with, to be honest. But everything else is kind of blocked in. That means I probably want to go with the darker purple here, or this color for these guys, because they've been kind of neglected here for a little bit, and I think the purple might work. Yeah, purple works good. I like that. The orange, however, is trash, so we need to fix that as well. So it might go with the green. Green might be kind of cool. Ooh, I kind of like that. It's just nice. I can kind of throw a gradation on that if need be. So we'll see what happens. No rush. But this, however, needs to be that color. Did I throw stuff on it? I did. Man, I'm an idiot. That means I have to go in here separately and put in those lines that I did earlier. Man. That's annoying. So at least. Well, I'll just do it manually. I just wanted some of those contour lines. I'm gonna turn the perspective on real quick, just because I want those lines to kind of have a little bit of a purpose here to kind of help lead the piece a little bit more. So this one's a little bit more like kind of in the extreme foreground, so I don't know how much it's going to follow, but you want some of those shapes in there if you can get away with it. Okay, but that color needs to be a little bit more. It's very easy, easy fix. Just do that. There you go. So, boom. Creates a little bit of distance. We do need to fix the. We need to find a dark color for this to kind of create a shadow, because you want to create like underneath shadow, and then we need to fix this value. So one thing at a time. Well, luckily we have it all figured out. So. There we go. And we might just make it like this value here. You know what, I'll just fill it, because at this point I could just paint that back in. But I want this halftone here. Done. Life is easy. I don't know why the thing didn't show up. Yes, the pay number thing is still happening. If you want to. My sister's saying hi. Hello, Carissa. That's my sister, everyone. I love her very much. Yeah, we can do. Heard you were going to be at Lightbox Expo. I'm sure stop by and say hi to you and AJ. Yeah, totally going to be there. So if you're trying to hang a little bit and talk art, all that stuff, I will be around. So don't be shy and come say hi. I'm rhyming in these commentaries. So yeah, come on by and say hi. If it's environment, quick note, if we're gonna be doing like feedback today, which I was kind of just impromptu, if we're gonna be doing that, then it has to be, I would prefer it to be environment based. Obviously that's gonna be my bread and butter, but it doesn't have to be, but I would prefer it, I would really much prefer it to be, if we're really gonna get back into this thing. So just keep that in mind if we're gonna go such a route. Cool. So now we got the colors. Like everything's kind of working now. I'm kind of digging it. Ooh, we'll throw a little bit on there. So all the colors are kind of in there. I want to start throwing in a little bit of like off-tone values here. So I can just paint that manually, honestly. So I just want to get like one tone where we're a little bit off. Let's see, is this tone? Yep, that's the tone. It's light work. So all I gotta do now is just kind of paint that in there. And so I'm hoping that this little off tone right here will make it a little bit more visually interesting. What's the difference there? So I went from 31 to 35. So we need to go in that range. There we go. That's the range that I want. Okay, so I can paint that and hit X, and every time I hit X, it's gonna paint in a little bit of that off-tone value. So I have some paintings for class. Don't mind if I get some feedback on those. Are they environment-based? If they are environment-based, then we can talk about it. If you're speaking my language, we can talk about it. Because eventually I will be doing like a kind of a feedback day. It used to be Feedback Fridays, right? It's just that I got hella busy and then kind of stopped doing stuff as a whole in general. But that is a possibility for that to happen. So I will have to make a Dropbox for that to happen. And I have one. I just gotta make sure I change the permissions for it. Well, that looks nice. I'm with that. I'm not sure if I want the lines. Let me go to that Dropbox right now. And change some permissions here. Let's see, share folder. People can edit, delete, comment, and add files to their Dropbox. Okay. Alright, create link. Alright, so we got two guys in Twitch and we got Andre in here. Alright, if you are trying to do some feedback today, I will do it this way for you. I'm about to go to my Twitch. I'm about to drop this in here. Hold on. So Twitch. And we'll get it happening. So we have this one right here. Boom. Can I post it in here? Alright, I gotta log in. Sorry, I'm a noob and I'm not logged in. God dang it. What am I doing? Hold on a second. Let me log into my Twitch here. There we go. Let's go, log me in. Oh, of course it's gotta send me a 2 verification thing. So dumb. Okay, 729 3783. Okay. Alright, so on my Twitch, obviously, we're in like opposite here. I'm creating a link, so give me a second. people with the link can view. Oh, no. How do I do this? Share folder. Yes, copy link. Okay, so boom. So that link right there, if you're in here, you can now send me something if you want to. The next person is in the YouTube. So let me go to the YouTube real quick. Let me make sure I'm logged into the YouTube. Or actually, I wonder if I can just put it here. I'm pretty sure I can just put it here, actually. Well, there you go. Actually, I can do it on both. So yeah, so right there, that link will allow you to throw some stuff in there if you're trying to do some feedback. Environment-based only, though. And then I will, after a while, I'll probably stop painting, and then we'll take a look and see what people have. Yeah? Alright. And then, depending on how this goes, I may just actually finish this up, like, offline, apparently, because I don't think it's building that much interest. I could probably do doing some more kind of painterly stuff. I just wanted something a little bit more kind of a paint by number thing a little bit. I don't know what I was kind of going for, to be honest. Ooh, you know what? Let me go back. Ooh, that looks nice. Or I think it does. I don't know about you. But always get a little bit of like a two-tone. It's like my trick. Cool. So I'm like super zoomed out, so I'm trying to just get this going. I think you can just, it should allow you to drop something in there, shouldn't it? I think, because on my side, right, if I go to like share folder, it says can edit. So if you have that link, it means people can edit, delete, comment, and add a file to their Dropbox. Or wait, no, maybe it's different. Hold on a second. Folder settings. Anyone with link? Oh, I don't know. Control who can view. You know what? Let's just do it this way. Instead, you can just email me here. You can download the folder. Okay, I gotta figure that out. I gotta figure out how you can drop something in there. I'll figure this out later. But in the meantime, just send it to there in my email, and then I will check said email, and then make sure you have your name, like your name, and then just name it like Twitch or whatever. Just like make the headline Twitch, so that I can that way I can search it if it's like, or Twitch or YouTube. Or just put in live stream, whatever you want to put. Just like put like feedback, I guess. Actually, put the word feedback. I'm an idiot. Put the word feedback, and then that way I'll be able to understand. I'll be able to kind of just see that, and then we'll be able to search it in case it gets stuck in the spam folder or something like that, which can totally happen. And then but you do need to be here though, so don't put it in here and then leave, because I will ask you questions, and if you don't answer the questions, then that's not like it needs to be more of an interactive thing. I need to know what you're thinking when you're doing stuff. So if you're not here, it's only people that are here that get that privilege. That's how it used to be back in the day. So that's how I'm gonna do it. Okay, back to this. Maybe it's a little more of a glowy thing. Ooh. sent? You sent 2. Dang, dude, you want all the critiques today. Let's see. So which one on Andres will let you pick one? Or I guess unless these are kind of like working together here. Sorry, let me go over here. Let me save it in a folder. And then let's see here. Cool. All right, let's take a look. Why not? Let's take a look. Why not? Let me take a break from this. So we have 2 things from Mr. Andres. So we have this interesting building. Kind of cool. And then we have what appears to be the same one. Okay. So why don't you tell me about these? You can text me any way you want. I'm curious. I see you using that shape tool. Nice. Why don't you tell me what your issue is, I guess, about like what you're looking for, or like what your problems are, and what you think like needs to be better. Because I do like it. It's interesting. There's definitely some interesting things happening here. And maybe while you're doing that, I think what could be useful here is if we maybe make a new one directly underneath it, because that can help us in terms of like creating a there we go. See? There we go. So for the graphic comps, I'm just thinking about strong reads. I think most of these are pretty strong. I can definitely feel what you're going for in terms of readability. I think most of these have a strong readability in terms of like they all look like satellites with like buildings. I think when we get back here, things get a little bit weird because we're not having, it feels really, really flat. We're not seeing any angles there. So changing up those angles a little bit can always help out. You know, these are nice. The texture gets kind of crazy in certain areas. Like sometimes I think in these little areas, I'm not sure why there's so much texture there. I guess it's just trying to be kind of like visually interesting. And so for the value, you're having trouble showing distance between the character and the radios. Okay. So I think if you ever want to show distance, it's always good to have another person somewhere. So if you have another person like right there, then it makes it a little bit easier. A good way to show distance, though, is always to kind of put something closer to you. Because usually what happens is, like, if you just draw something, like if I draw a person right here on a cliff, and he's that size, and then I draw another cliff, like, way over here, and he's this size, like, that size, we already have, like, a way to kind of establish, like, how far that might be, because we see someone here very, very close. So if anything, maybe you want to put the person a little bit closer to kind of create that distance. Also, there isn't anything obstructing our view, and that's kind of an issue as well, because there's no overlap here. The only overlap you have currently right now is right here, and it's not even an overlap, to be honest. Like, it's kind of... Alright, is there color in here? Of course there's not. Sorry, I'm gonna change everything to RGB, by the way. So the only overlap you have is right here, and that doesn't really, you know what I mean? That's not gonna help it because there's still that space right there. So normally you can never see that far. Like if you're literally gonna paint something, you can never see that far, like into a distance without something kind of obstructing your view. So if you were to draw that again, you're better off probably making something like a lot more like bigger, like if that makes sense. So like by painting over, like if I'm gonna use this value right here just for an example, you know, why not just make this guy like really big. So that might be kind of what you're going for a little bit more. And then make it a little bit more dominant is what I would probably suggest if you really want to kind of show more depth. So that means that if you put this guy then behind it, like, you know, smaller, and then we can barely see it, I feel like that is gonna get you the result that you're looking for, especially if you really kind of push. So right now you have this like interesting shape, right? And I'm trying my best to kind of, you know, do it justice because you have like took a lot of time here. Where's my shit? I'm just gonna get a circle brush so that I can paint a ball. So like that's gonna be like, I'd spend more time like here, like figuring out like where you want this to be graphically, and I think it will make it a little bit easier. So that might be like a better read, and then I would probably even then like distort it a little bit too, like so I can kind of. Okay, maybe not that distorted, but what I mean. So then I would kind of create a little bit like less space. So then if you even were to like even try to put something back there, it would be a lot harder. So let me just erase this guy. So I'm trying to get the right angle here. Cool. So then if you were to put another piece there. Sorry, I'm trying to get these angles, which aren't that important in theory, but like it's annoying me that I'm not getting the angle that I want. Which just goes to show, like, every angle is like super important. Like every placement of something is really, really important. So then I'll go a little bit lighter here and maybe a little bit. Alright, maybe this has to be lighter, so I apologize by dragging upward. There we go. Cool. Why did I lose the color again? What the hell? Sorry, don't flatten. Alright. So there we go. So maybe that one's gonna be like that big, you know? So it's a little bit more of an easier read. Now, that solves like maybe one of the problems in terms of like making it a little bit more dominant, I guess, in one direction. In terms of making something... So the problem right here is that we have this space right here, and we want to figure out a way, like your visual problem is like, how do we create a little hill right here or something like that, and how do we get from here to there and convey that distance? Obviously we want to create like a rhythm, and a rhythm is usually like the best way you can do that, and so you can put things ahead of it if you want, like you can make little obstructions, but you need to figure out, in my opinion, like how do we create that kind of atmospheric perspective that you kind of get in landscapes that will help kind of push this thing like further back, you know what I mean? And so that's kind of a hard one to kind of do. Sometimes what I'll do though is like, if I'm having troubles, I'll just draw random shapes underneath. So like for example, like I'll just kind of look at it like this, and let's just say that I grab this kind of shape, yeah? Like let's just say I grab, you know, something like that, and maybe I'll make it a little bit lighter actually. What I'll do is I'll take that and I'll distort it, so that way it will create some of that perspective for me. So that's kind of a nice way I like to do things. Because sometimes like getting like the right angle can actually be a punk to like kind of like handle. So you might do something like that where like it feels like kind of flat. Something like that. And so that begins to kind of create a little bit of a texture. You can even duplicate it again. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll actually just flip it. and I'll kind of just make it even more flatter. So now, like, it's the same texture, right? The same little bit of texture, but now it's like super flat. And it's like that kind of stuff, like those lines are kind of hard to like reproduce if you really want to like sell the idea of a character. Also, it's usually a good thing if you're the same height as the character. You'll want to make the character like have the head of the horizon. So like your character is like really below, so it's kind of hard to judge that distance. So the main problem that you have, if you really want to fix this, is the distance in theory right here is, or my question to you is like, how far is this distance? Like how far is that in your head? How far is it from here to there? And if you can't answer that, then that's the problem yourself, is you're not really thinking about it. Like you're drawing it, but you're not thinking about it. Like you're not having the intention to put a stroke that helps solve that issue, if that makes sense. And so that's where you're having probably a relapse, and I can tell it's getting muddy right here because you're not thinking about it. So what you need to kind of start figuring out in your head is what is the distance. And usually if I have a trouble with that, I'll actually write it out. Like I'll write out like how far I think something is. And looking at photography will actually help you out. If you ever go take your own photos and you know how something far is, take a picture of it, you'll then figure out like what happens as things begin to kind of go off in the distance. Like how far is that from there to there, you know what I mean? And so putting little people or putting like little repeating elements is always really nice. So that's why like rocks are really good for this, because if you put a rock right here, you know, and then maybe these rocks are kind of getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, those things will really help you out, right? Let's say you put like some kind of like sci-fi post or something like that. If you put the same sci-fi post here, it helps us gauge a little bit of where things might be. Having tracks, having roads, something visual is always really nice. So that way, if he's on the road here, right, let's say the road is right here and it gets a little bit smaller, well then we know how far that road possibly is. So you gotta think about ways you can convey depth, and a lot of that is overlap and a lot of it is scale. And so those are the things that you're missing. And so that's what I've been trying to kind of convey here. If I could, I would begin to kind of use something like this, these shapes, to help kind of convey that distance over time. Okay, does that make sense a little bit in terms of like why it's not working? Like, I mean, this is just my opinion, by the way. You can tell me to totally fuck off and ask for your painting back. But that's like, in my opinion, like you're not looking at enough like actual like evidence of like deserts that are like far in the distance. And I think if you do, it will make your life like a lot easier to get that to look better. What do you think? Sorry, I don't know if you're talking or not because I have to go into the Twitch to make sure people aren't writing stuff. So I'll give you a few seconds. If you don't have any more questions after that, what I'll do is I'll move on over here. It looks like we have one from Jack Chu. And we'll go over to Jack, and we'll see what Jack's up to. So let me know, Andres, if you're still there. He's probably gone. All right, let me blow my nose real quick, and then we'll start moving on to the next thing, and we'll see what we got going. All right, Mr. Jack Chu, are you there, sir? If you are there, say something in the chat so that I can confirm to open up your file. Let's see here. Alright, you are here, my man. Alright, Andres is somewhere else. How dare he? How dare he leave? All right, don't leave though. So, because apparently I just left and. Okay, cool. All right. Cool. All right. Well, Andres is gone for whatever reason, and Let's go to Mr. Jack Chu. Interesting. All right, you have some color stuff, and we're gonna download yours on my other screen here because I have like 3 screens. So give me a second, and let's see what we can do here. Let's see. And there he is. Oh, okay. Emergency bathroom. Well, there you go. Sorry. You'll have to rewatch some stuff. But I hope whatever you watch, if you rewind it, hopefully that helps you what I was talking about. Okay, let's see here. Mr. Jack Chu, some plein air pieces. Very, very nice. Let's see. He's not so much in terms of, let's get back on values and composition. Cool. In terms of color, though, I feel like we can get some more cools in there. And overall, your organization, in terms of overlap, I think the way that you're kind of indicating detail could be stronger. I think that's probably a couple of things. Like how you're indicating this is kind of crazy. It's like with that crazy like that brush that everyone uses for whatever reason. It's like that crazy like I like how you're doing the colors though. The colors are actually really cool. But this crazy like brush thing that people do here for whatever reason with this the leaf brush is kind of like, I would encourage you to kind of figure out ways to paint it like manually if you can, or ways to figure out like what you actually need to interpret like a bush or like a tree, if that makes sense. So that's what I would look at like in the future, is ways to kind of like forego using crazy brushes. So so right now what I think we're kind of missing here is like layering. Like I would use a lot more layers in terms of like how you're painting stuff. So I see like 3 layers of overlap, which is like right here, right there, right there, right there, and then boom, boom, and then you have your bench, and then you have your tree, which looks like it's kind of like coming down like in that area. So that's like a lot of layers that you could be using that I feel like it's kind of like missed opportunities. So if I may, I'll kind of give you like an idea of what that would look like. So if I make a new layer right here, I'm just gonna paint this like straight up, like how I would begin to paint it, is keeping more layers. This is why digital is like beautiful in this way, because you can actually like, you don't have to worry about like messing up or painting over something. So, which by the way, I'm always gonna add a little bit more red whenever I can to something. Like that's just me. You always want to have a little bit more of that kind of reddish value in there or something. That's just a personal kind of thing, but don't worry about it. So okay, so we have this. Let's say that I have this piece right here. I'm now on the other side of this is going to paint the other piece underneath it. So we have this piece right there. We now have this guy right there. And then we're going to take your green, which is kind of like, there's a green, it could actually be that color, but like it's kind of an ugly green, to be honest. Like I don't like that green. So what I do want to do though is then kind of see if I can like indicate that green a little bit better right there. So like now we have, and I'll probably even paint one more ahead of it, just because it feels like there's a little bit of an overlap going on there. So I will now go over here and kind of like mess with that a little bit. So the reason why I like doing it this way is now once I kind of get things where I want, like to get that overlap, to get some of these colors in here would actually be a huge pain, because anytime you draw through the form, you don't have, you would kind of automatically paint over this area right here. But because it's all separated out, you don't have to worry about that. So now like I can just kind of worry about just kind of painting things the way I want to. So I can add gradations, I can add like a little bit of green here and there. I can go into here, I can lock the transparency again, and I can really figure out all the little texture bits that I would like in the piece. And I don't have to really worry about like overstepping or like, you know, painting or kind of like getting muddy. Usually like when you have problems with like muddy paintings, it's because like you're painting over something, and though it fixes one problem, it creates another problem, and so you're going back and forth trying to do that. But with layers, it kind of solves that problem inherently, because then you don't have to sit there and like if you're kind of scared about something, just make it a layer, because in the end you can always merge it down later on. So later on up to here, I can merge all this down if I want to. But for now, I'm going to keep it separate. So, you know, I can have all that stuff in there. So now that means in between that, I would then make a layer of the actual tree, right? And so a common like mistake with trees is like, you don't have to, I would just start with like a bigger brush in the beginning. And then as I'm making a new kind of mark, I would just lower the size of my brush. So I don't know if you kind of see that, like how I'm kind of making it is like, so it just makes for like a better visual like stroke to it if you kind of do it this way. So then as I get there, so like you can't see my hand right now, but like my hand is like hitting the bracket keys to make it smaller, like each time I go back, you know what I mean? And then you can kind of have that the way you want. So it makes it a little bit easier to kind of push that. Right, so now you have like a nicer shape. Then you want to find out like what your dark value is, because with trees you're always gonna have some kind of dark value. So like in this one in particular, you're always gonna have, like, trees always do this, and I always do it when I paint a tree, is I always put in like a little shadow like right underneath it, and all that does is it just shows that if there's light coming from above, it just indicates like a shadow. That's all it really does. So all the time I'll throw in those little highlights in there, and they're like really helpful. And then obviously as we get further back, then we may want to kind of create some gradations in there. But for the most part, if you do that right there and cut it off, it kind of creates that overlap. So that's why like these little shadows can be like really helpful to kind of show a little bit more space, a little bit more form as you're painting. So that can be helpful. So already we're getting a lot of stuff in there. And then I always like to kind of throw in a little bit of a light. Light usually hits the bottom, so it kind of feels like a missed opportunity. So even if it's not even there, like I always just do it anyway, because that's where your job, I think, as a plein air painter is to kind of like, you don't want to copy it verbatim, but you do want to kind of make it more visually interesting. Like your job is to take that and make it better, right? Otherwise you just hire a photographer, right? So that's where I would go in there, and I probably would try to figure out ways I can get more like reddish colors in there. So like on the edges, you know when like you see like something like a form turn, it kind of has like those reddish kind of colors. Like when something goes into shadow, you get like those red colors in there. And I always like those, to be honest. They're like really, really cool. Which means that I now have to then like turn this up a lot to the orange kind of color there. See? Yeah. So, and by the way, this is all with one brush too, by the way. So that's where. And then, on the bottom, I love to throw in like blue and stuff, like these kind of things. And I can paint outside the form because I have it on layers, right? It just makes it that much more like easier to kind of get all those little hints in there. So same thing right here is like, here's a great example of like something that I would normally like, it would be muddy as hell. So like right here, normally if you were to paint a shadow on this layer, if I wanted to kind of create actual form, I would do it like this, right? I would kind of paint that in there. Well, now I don't have to worry about like having to kind of create that extra form because it's in front of it and it's on a separate layer. So then I don't have to worry about it. Like it makes it that easier. Eventually I can connect it, right? Eventually I can go in there and I can make that connection. But until like I get the placement right, until like I know for 100% like that's the way that I want it, like I'm not gonna sit there and noodle that forever when I can just separate the layer, and it makes my life a little bit easier. See what I'm saying? Like, and now if I want to, I can even take some of that stuff, and again, I'm just using one brush, so like it's like pretty easy to kind of like handle, like if you're painting stuff, yeah. And then eventually I'll begin to like mess with like the right? Like the texture of this thing if I was really painting grass or whatever, but whole other story. Breaking down simple shapes and layers seems like it would be helpful. How would you suggest painting a lot of plants and trees, leaves manually? Painting trees and leaves manually, I think, is all about texture. You don't really need to paint like every like piece like manually. A lot of it is just kind of like the separation. So for example, like if I'm here, all I would really do, in my opinion, is I would kind of figure out the actual form of the tree. So let's say the form of the tree is kind of going like in this angle. What you need to figure out is the overall shape and then the values of the tree. So right now, if that's my tree, I need to figure out like two things in my opinion. I need to figure out like the shadow shape. So let's just say that your light's kind of coming from the left side, right? I want to figure out my highlights or my shadow. I need to figure out my like mid-tone. It's right there. Now maybe there's like a little bit of like a hint right there. And then I need to figure out like my overall, it'll probably be like 4 layers actually of like color. Okay. So there. So that would be that value. And then it looks like then our last color would be probably like heat. So we're probably gonna go a little bit higher than that value right there. So let's say like those are our values. That's what I need to figure out is figure out those shapes right there. And once you can kind of figure that out, it then makes it a lot easier to kind of like paint in the shapes. So I try to break it down to its simple shapes in terms of like lighting and stuff like that. It then makes it a lot easier to understand like where you're putting those things at, if that makes sense. So if I were to take that over here and just kind of save this over, all right, like that's like the shape. Hopefully you can understand now. It makes it a little bit easier to kind of paint something. So in theory, what I would do is I would put something behind it. And so if I'm painting the shape, I know that, okay, if it's behind it, it's, you know, and keep in mind, I'm still using the same brush, by the way. So all I'm really wanting to do is to kind of create that shape that we just made. But all I'm doing is I'm just putting the shadow side first. And so keeping the brush big is really, really important in the beginning. And then once you do that, you can kind of just mess with the edges. You can kind of play off of that a little bit. But you want to start big and then move small. Does that make sense in terms of like how I'm kind of making that happen? Like bigger, like always big first. And then kind of work your way to a smaller brush size. So the same way that I did the tree is the same way that you would want to approach the leaves. That's kind of like anything, I think, in general. Like if you think about it this way, like I'm sure you've done life drawing, right? For those people that are in here, life drawing is the same exact shit, right? We don't go in there and we don't sit there and kind of like draw like the smaller stuff and, you know, draw the body and whatnot. Normally when we do life drawing, we kind of get the bigger shapes first, right? We take our brush and we use a big stroke. We go across, right? We figure out, oh, okay, here's the head. We figure that out. Let's say, sorry, this is my shitty attempt at life drawing, right? We get these big giant shapes and we're trying to figure out like the torso, all that kind of stuff, and all these things right here, and we're figuring out the connections, right? And then eventually we can then get the brush a little bit smaller and start to kind of really figure out, you know, the connections and where something sits, right? All that kind of stuff and whatnot. But again, it's always, before we kind of get that stuff, it's always like these bigger strokes first. So that's where you begin to realize that like all the shit that you do when you're doing life drawing and all that stuff, it's all the same thing. It doesn't matter whether it's an environment or a character, all that fundamental shit like still applies. And so if you learn to kind of keep that stuff, like if you learn to kind of apply it anywhere in terms of like working big and then working small, or kind of underlying, figuring out like the basic shapes, like the same way that you figure out like how a shoulder works, right? We break it down, right? We draw like the tube, and then we draw that shape in front of it, and then all of a sudden that connection, right, is what allows us to draw like the arm of something. That has to happen through drawing these two shapes first, you know what I mean? The same thing happens in environments. It's not much of a difference. You just have to learn to apply it differently, like a little bit differently. but the same thing still applies. So that's where you have to kind of sit there and kind of figure out fundamentally, like breaking down a tree, what's the simple shape, where's the lighting coming from, using big brushes, how can I kind of make that, how could I make that statement? I always call it a statement. I think Jama is the one that kind of coined that term. Making a simple statement means, like, to me, like, again, looking at something and figuring out, like, how do I indicate a tree as simple as possible. And if you look at people like Nathan Fowlkes, like Josh Clare, any of like the old school people, for example, let me take a look at them right now because it's really, really easy. Josh Clare is like one of my favorite people. He's actually selling some pieces right now, and I really want to buy one. Like how he indicates trees is very, very simple, right? Look at that. It's amazing. There's like not much there, but it's still, you still get that it's a tree. Well, why is that? That I can't answer for you. Like, I have some ideas on why it looks like a tree and why I think it works. But again, that is up to you to kind of figure out and how you can kind of make that your own. Like, you get that's brush. It comes from color, the proportions, all these things make it so it's easy to understand. Another person like Zhao Ming Wu, it's that same thing. He's badass. His environments are badass too, and he does characters. I hate this guy, but he's fucking tight. He's so dope. I would like to meet him. But you can see how he indicates form as well, like when you look at some of these. Right? Like, you get that it's a tree. You understand, like, the basic shapes. You can see him kind of carving it out. And that's how you know, like, you're a fucking G. When you can actually, like, create those gradations. God damn, that guy's good. So there you go. So when in doubt, old masters, man. And think of it the same way that you would too, like traditionally, like how you would approach it traditionally. It's the same way. So you can see all the stuff that I'm doing here. Once you get all that down, by the way, then you can go in there and do all the fucking John Park shit that everyone does. Shout out to John Park, because everyone wants to paint like him, including myself. Then you can go in there and, you know, you can add all this texture and stuff like that. But that foundation kind of needs to be there first before you even begin to kind of like attempt to even play that game of like, hey, let me throw in like this like crazy bits of like texture and then, you know, smudge it and whatever the hell people do nowadays. You know, all this kind of stuff. Before you can get into all that kind of like interesting texture, this has to be figured out. So after you do that, then you would go in, and that's when you can easily kind of begin to make some strokes in there. And then the question I would ask to you is like, do you need to paint every individual like leaf in order for the viewer to understand that it's a tree? And if the answer is no, then like, why do you want to do it so badly? Like, it's one of those things where it's like, is it necessary in order to convey something? And if it isn't, then I would probably begin to like question like why you're trying to do it. Because like when you're working a job, like if I don't have time to paint everything, I'm gonna paint what's most important about the scene, as opposed to kind of like, oh, let me paint every single piece of leaf. I mean, like if you don't need to do it in order to indicate that it's a tree, then I wouldn't necessarily worry about it, to be honest. Especially for plein air painting. Plein air painting is the same exact thing. And life drawing, your job is to look at the form and think, what do I need from it in order for it to convey what the person is doing in the painting. So then if I don't need to paint like a crazy vein or like a part of the torso, then I'm not gonna do it. So you have to kind of begin to kind of like pick your battles too, in terms of like, if there's all this like stuff here with this like texture and stuff, I may just kind of like paint a simple shape and then just go over that, you know what I mean? Like, this is actually kind of ugly, by the way, because I didn't do it correctly. But I would begin to take my time and begin to kind of paint in these shapes, and then maybe over time I can begin to kind of erase and figure out like the texture of something. Yeah, they're available. There's a Dropbox link I gave a long time ago. I don't know where that Dropbox link is. But by the way, the brushes that I'm using are all like, I think are just John Park's brushes. So I think if you just download any of John Park's like brushes, then that will solve your issue. So anyways, yeah, so that's all that I'm doing here is I'm just kind of like thinking of it in a three-dimensional shape, kind of what I'm doing now, and then I'm kind of just erasing anytime I feel like it's not kind of creating the form that I want. You know what I mean? Like, so slowly but surely, as I begin to kind of like make the stroke and kind of erase it, we're finding like really interesting kind of things here, right? You can kind of see how that kind of works. So now we're making like, and trees are freaking hard to do, by the way. Cool, you know what I mean? So like, a lot of it to me is like getting the edges really interesting. So I always try to like paint a shape, and then once I'm done with it, then I'll try to go, yeah, if you're at a brainstorm, I don't know why you're here. Just go ask them. You don't even need to be here. You're at a brainstorm. That's just my opinion. Take Esther Wu's class, and then you're probably set for life. Or Mickey's class. I think he's teaching that class, isn't he? I don't know. See, then you can erase and create all that shit that like I don't like. But it's totally there. Like, what is? Okay, that's probably a better one. You just gotta find like a good brush that creates the texture that you want, and then once you do that and you start painting in like the gradations and stuff, that's when things begin to kind of open up for you as a painter, right? And it makes your life a little bit easier. See that? And then you can create all the fucking gradations that you want, all that stuff. But again, you need to kind of really think about how you're trying to interpret something. I think is a really big thing for you if you're trying to do that kind of stuff. Yeah. So that's my answer. So then again, once you get all this stuff, now you can like merge it all down. Let's say I want to merge it all down. Once you're ready, then you can do that stuff, and then you can get all the kind of crazy brushes that your heart desires, all the ones that people use nowadays that I have no clue. Let's say this one is one of my favorite ones, I guess. You can, and now you're like, oh, I'm a traditional painter. Actually, no. Where's that mixer brush that I had? It's like that. Oh shit, I'm Craig Mullen? Not really. Okay, anyways, hopefully that answers your question. Alright, cool. Yeah, good stuff. We'll try to do more of these, like, towards the weekend, but when I start actually teaching, I'm kind of off right now. I'm actually on break. When I start teaching again, this may be kind of like few and far between, but I will try to like link back to these and try to show like, hey, how does this relate? But I mean, fundamentals is where it's at personally. Like, the more fundamentals you have, the easier that is to do. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't really matter what style you're kind of going for. All this stuff will kind of like will transfer over. Question: when and where will you be teaching? I teach over at CGMA, which is the CG Masters Academy. I have a environment class there that starts up this week. Actually, I gotta check into the class, make sure everyone's doing good. And then I do teach at the academy, but it's online though. So I'll probably be doing stuff like this at Lightbox. Actually, if you guys are gonna be at Lightbox Expo, I should get paid to promote them. I'm just kidding. No one watches this shit, so it's all good. I'm gonna show 5 people what's up. So right here is where you can go to Lightbox Expo. It's in Pasadena, September 6th to 8th. Me and AJ have a booth, and we'll be there. I have no idea what we're doing. I might make some prints. That's what I'm kind of thinking about it, but I doubt anyone's gonna want to buy it. But maybe I want to make a book. That's probably what I really want to do. But that's already a whole other can of worms that I want to do. Like a small book, not like some crazy ass book. Like a small little book that's like a guide to doing environments. That's what I want to do. Like a pocket-sized book that you can keep with you is like my idea in my head. But another time for another day. But 6th to 8th September, I will be there hanging out. So I will be doing like paint-overs like this and like talking about stuff at the booth. So if you want to come by and like talk more art, like you can. And hopefully you'll be able to see like whether we're doing something like this or something like that. Like, it doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? Life drawing, digital painting, traditional drawing, it's all the same. It's just a different tool. And the more you realize that, the more you don't get like intimidated, and the more you kind of just figure out a way to kind of apply what you learn, but a little bit differently. Cool. All right, that was a good stream, man. I think that was a good one. So maybe what I'll do is I'll maybe do like a plein air study, if that's something what you guys want to see. Is I can actually maybe take a photo of things that I've taken a photo of and maybe do a study off of it. Because that might be kind of useful, I assume, if people are kind of down for that. And we could figure out a way to make that happen too. So I'm not really sure. So we'll figure it out. But my wife has made like some amazing freaking dinner, and it smells really good. And I thought I was gonna stream for longer, and that was until I smelled that dinner. And I feel like I gotta go do it. But now I'm like getting texture in here and stuff like that, and looking kind of good, and I can start throwing in some stuff, but who knows? But it's cool. All right, anyways, what I want to do is we'll leave it up to if there's any final questions or anything like that, and we'll go from there. Why is that on read only? Oh, that's lame. Let's see. Do I got a cold? Yeah, I have a cold. I'm an idiot. All right, cool. All right, cool. I will leave you guys to it if there are no more questions. So I'm gonna go eat and hang out with my wife, and then I'm gonna go play Apex for an obscene amount of time, and then fall asleep really, really late, and then go play soccer in the morning. That is my plan, and I hope you all have a good plan for yourself. Cool. All right, look at now it jumps to 9 people like as I'm like leaving. That's funny. Like before it was like 3 steady, and now it's like, oh, 9. I'm like, dude, I'm leaving right now. What the hell? All right, maybe it's all. Of course, it's Twitch. You Twitch people always so late. All right. Yeah. So if you do share this video with someone, if you think it's gonna be helpful, like, favorite, subscribe, all that BS. There you go. I appreciate them coming through. Yeah, just watch the video. Watch the video after this, and y'all be good to go. But I do not have a set time. If you write stuff to me about what times that you think are good, my idea right now is I want to start maybe streaming like a Tuesday or a Friday. I think Tuesday, Fridays are probably the best times for me. Like Tuesday night and Friday night. Like I want to try at least twice. So Friday would be like a feedback day, and Tuesday would be a paint day where I paint something. That's what I'm going for right now. So unless the weekend is good, but the problem is the weekend is my CGMA class, and I don't know if I seriously want to like do that class and then like do some more feedback online, you know what I mean? So I'm kind of torn a little bit about doing, like, I don't want to do too much feedback, so we'll see. But yeah, let me know if you guys have any questions about that, or if you have suggestions about good streaming times, and then we'll go from there, dude. All right? Okay, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it, and I will see you guys when I see you. Take care, and as always, peace out. I'm gonna go to the thanks for watching screen. Look at that screen.